Chapter 501. Send Aid. Dominic examined the airship, then looked out the window at the weather. Despite the weather not being great, this would actually be a great time to test the airship. We could send it to Darden or Burton to pick up some nobles and supplies. That's a 12-hour round trip at cruising speed, plus loading time. It certainly isn't optimal, leaving this late, but Coster might not have what we need, he suggested. The dwarves frowned. Actually, loading it with food and sending it to Castle City would be a good test as well, and they still need it, as the fields are regrowing from the attacks, and they're still flooded with refugees. Should we move it to the airship loading area near the Merchant Guild as the test to function, and then send some of them along on the trip as observers? You can show them what it takes to fly the thing, how much magic and skill. Testing it in poor conditions might convince them that we're extremely confident in our design, to the point that we don't feel the need to test in perfect conditions first. The dwarves laughed. You know that is a safety thing, not a confidence matter, right? Everyone on a test flight equips a parachute, in case things go catastrophically wrong due to an engineering oversight. We are all confident that it will be fine, but the guild might not appreciate us overlooking basic safety procedures, especially when they were the ones who created them. Fine. We can wait for the storm to pass before we send it out. But excellent work getting it ready so fast. There isn't anything like this in the sky, and with all the evacuations that are being called, we might actually have a good use for it very soon. The dwarves waited for him to continue. The airship would be in huge demand. Of course, there was a good use for it. You see, all sorts of farms are getting flooded out in Dago's territories. Wouldn't it just be properly humane of us to go rescue some of the livestock before they drowned? Team leader Gully grinned and poured an ale. Now you're talking. I suppose that for a humanitarian emergency, there is no reason that we couldn't deploy the airship before it has finished testing. Goats? Are we going to get goats? Dave asked from the door. Gully smiled. Yes, I think that we are. We will inform the guild that we ignored safety protocol in the name of saving lives. They don't have to know that we're only going for the livestock. If we head northwest to the Skipton River, it will take us half the day to get there, but we should be able to find some livestock to rescue with the amount of flooding that has been reported in the area. It's all Dago's controlled, though. So, we might get into the ugly stuff earlier than planned. Everything that Dago's controls seems to be getting hit with monster storms right now, like the old king is taking vengeance on them for his death. But I reckon that if we happen to find livestock with a farmer, we could relocate them all as a group. That was fair. The farmers were all Wavemates locals anyhow, folks who had been here for generations. There was no good reason not to rescue them, just because they were on the wrong side of the current border. If they were questioned about it, he could just call it humanitarian work by the guilds, and nothing to do with him other than supplying the airship. No harm, no foul. Well, there could be some fouling. Picking up an entire herd of sheep or cattle in the airship would require significant cleaning when they returned. Boys, start preparing to depart. Open the hangar doors, prepare the guide chains, and the ballast bags. The wind isn't too high to get out of the dock yet, so we should make our move. Gully ordered. The airship hangar broke into action, with everyone scrambling about to get the last bits of preparation to fly done, and finishing pre-flight checks that weren't scheduled to be done for a few more days. Picking up people in the cargo hold was easy, and there was plenty of room up front, even in cargo configuration. It was all about how many head of livestock they could load into the cargo compartment. In theory, they could get over 100 head of cattle in the hold, given that they usually weighed about 500 kilos fully grown. But Dago's had been in drought a long time, so there was a good chance they would be underweight compared to local beef, and they would run out of space before they hit maximum weight. The turbines were powered on as the steam vessel came up to temperature with fire magic, and the thrust nozzles were tested and adjusted, so it was mostly moving on its own at a slow walk. The extra thrust helped keep the wind from smashing it into the building as they let it outside, and Dominic realized that he had made an oversight when he designed the warehouse. It would have been better to have the cranes move fully out of the way and the roof open than to have one end open so the airship could be let out. It would be faster, with less chance of damage. However, they did manage to get it out without incident, and every one of the dwarves loaded on board, along with 2 of the trolls. The prospect of rescuing a whole flock of goats was too great for them to allow the dwarves to go alone. They wouldn't have any updates on the rescue until later in the day. The northern border of Stancha province was 500 kilometers away. But they would have performance numbers right away. Dominic watched in satisfaction as they got ready to depart, and was so intent on the spectacle of the giant airship that he didn't even notice the frantic merchant running his way until the man started shouting his name. Duke Dominic. Are they testing the new airship? Please ask them to hold. We have an emergency shipment to go to Limsbury, and none of our airships can fly in headwinds over 50 kilometers an hour. That one can, right? It's got a mostly rigid envelope, so it should be able to. Dominic nodded. It's going out for a first test flight and a humanitarian rescue of farmers in the border region who are facing flash flooding. It's not cleared to carry cargo for hire yet. The merchant shook his head. I don't think that matters right now. There is a caravan outside Limsbury coming from Kynwyn, and the count escorting them has been infected with a highly lethal virus. The medicine for it doesn't grow anywhere else in the region, but the witches had some prepared. We need to get it to him and the noble ladies with him before someone has to explain to the King of Axbridge that we lost them to bandits en route. Bandits using virus attacks? That was not something that Dominic could overlook. Chapter 502. And medicine. Get the medicine and get on board the airship. You will make the delivery since you know what is going on. There is rope and netting on board, so you can lower it to them and maintain a safe distance if needed. Dominic ordered, then waved for the airship to wait. The merchant nodded, checked his storage ring, which presumably had the medicine, and ran for the open door. Wait, before you go. What sort of virus is it? It's the mana plague, a disease designed to kill magic users. The report we have says that Dago's bandits deliberately targeted them with it on the Kynwyn side of the border, but didn't follow them when they fled south past the checkpoint. Then he was in the airship, and Gully was releasing the latches for the extra ballast bags, so he could start gaining altitude faster. Though bags might be the wrong word for them. They had used huge stone blocks as ballast as they were easier for the team to make, and an airship that size needed a huge amount of weight for primary testing. Many of the townsfolk came out in the light rain to observe the spectacle of a massive airship departing from the remote warehouse and the incredible speed that it was attaining as it gained altitude. The Wistoverk River ran straight west of the city, so there was little chance of major flooding due to these storms, but the further north they went, the more of the land that drained into the Skipton River, then into the Kynwyn River, which was said to already be flooding over the level of the city's levees. The thought made Dominic wince. How much history was going to be lost in that flood? Kynwyn had been at that location for 1,000 years, and in all that time, Dominic didn't remember anything in the history books about the levees being breached, only that they had been rebuilt multiple times when they got old, or the stone became too worn with age. He wasn't the only one who had that idea, though. All over Kynwyn and the surrounding territories, valuable relics were being moved to high ground. Ancient tomes were being sealed in airtight containers and placed in the most secure locations available, in case the water collapsed structures. The royal palace was being barricaded, and the gates blocked with earthworks, sealing the floodwaters out, while Magitech pumps ran constantly to keep the catacombs and dungeons from flooding entirely. The palace was raised above the majority of the city, but the river ran through the city itself, inside the city walls. There was no way to save most of Kynwyn from a disaster on this level. There was no way that anyone was going to come rescue them. The winds were too high, and the whole region was flooded already, the parched ground unable to absorb water fast enough to compensate for the rainfall. Dominic watched their new airship race off into the distance, and realized that he had forgotten the most important question. He forgot to ask what they named her. Every airship needed a name, just like ships of the naval fleet. You simply didn't send one up without it. He would ask when they got back. Instead of lingering, Dominic took the rest of his security team back to the manor in the drizzling rain, intending to help set up the covers over the event area so that they could continue the parties. Dave was already busy at it, using nature magic to grow out a canopy of vines and long tree branches over the garden, creating a maze of sheltered areas. Or, they would be sheltered, once there was a proper cover on them. The merchants had sent over a mountain of white canvas that the staff was pulling over the natural awnings, while Dave simply grew branches around the knots so that they couldn't be blown away. There was a lot of trimming to do to get the canvas to the right shape, but working together it was coming along very well. Well enough that most of the event was on the back patio already, under an awning stretched between the manor wall and two new trees. The canvas shadowed the event more than Dominic would have preferred, but they could set up lights when it got closer to dark, or if the cloud cover got heavier. Currently, it was thin, and you could almost see the sun through the light rain and hazy clouds. Looking at it from a distance, the effect was beautiful. Acres of white canvas and green leaves stretched over the garden, and Dominic could see how the garden would still look very similar to the way that it had once the canvas was removed. Assuming that it was. The hedges grew well in the shade, so there wasn't an urgent reason to remove most of the covers, and some of them would be fairly easily retractable, thanks to Dave placing trees that could be pruned into pillars on their lower sections once they had some more time to mature. A bit of rope and a few hours' work could replace the removed canvas and extended branches the next time that they wanted them in place. Dominic didn't expect to have to host quite so many people regularly. Even once the duchy was fully occupied, invites for the major holidays would only bring them half as many noble couples as were currently here. The knights typically didn't come if they weren't nearby. They would go to the count or baron nearest them, if that noble wasn't going to the duke's manor. Was there a reason that the airship prototype was sent out without any fanfare? Alexis whispered as Dominic approached. Humanitarian aid. There's a lot of flooding near the border, and Dave made the most excellent point that there should be quite a few displaced goats in need of a new home. You sent them to steal livestock? They'll bring the farmers too if they find them. The river has completely flooded, and it's spreading overland fast with the amount of rain. Everything is already saturated, so it's not going to stop until everything near river level is flooded. So, call it a cargo weight stress test, and bring a whole bunch of goats and sheep back to make the trolls happy? Exactly. They also had to make a stop near Limpsbury. There was an incident with an Axbridge convoy. I will tell you about it later. There were too many curious ears around them at the moment. Chapter 503. Suspicious Motivations. The drizzle turned into steady rain as Dominic sat on the balcony of his office under a newly installed awning and listened to the radio while watching the party unfold. We are arriving at the designated location outside Limpsbury. Elapsed time, 3 hours and 58 minutes. Average speed over ground calculated to 80 kilometers an hour. Delivery is being made now. We will update as needed. That was what Dominic had been waiting for among the sea of evacuation messages and emergency requests. With that bit of information at hand, he headed back down to join the guests and see how the list of requested weddings was coming along. He assumed that some were holding off because there were sure to be more coming to the region, but once they found a good match, many of the nobles wouldn't wait to get some security. However, he had not expected that nearly a third of the natural sons were either on the list already or in serious discussions with at least one of the ladies. They were moving much faster than the other young noblemen, and Dominic could guess at the reason why. If they were starting with a family, they would normally be granted more land than a single nobleman who had no dependents. For the barons, it wouldn't change much. They would be expected to gain an heir eventually. But the knighthood wasn't hereditary, only the noble status that came from it. There were quite a few others on the list as well, Dominic noted, and a few who were requesting leave to head back to their families. They would take care of the marriage there, with a full ceremony, instead of the rushed circumstances of the mass weddings during the event. They were also eager to get back inland in Signia and further from the extreme weather. Compared to Dominic's worries of extra guests and mass marriages, the other senior nobles of the region had much more dire concerns. In the Signia royal palace, the king and his 2 oldest sons were sitting across from each other in front of the fireplace in the king's lounge. Alex, repeat that to me again. I don't think that I followed you the first time. You're saying that the king of Shersdonia is not working against us, but that he's also behind the mage sects that have been helping summon monsters all across Dagos and Skipple, and into Axbridge, Mitfield, and Stantia province. The second prince agreed. My investigations tell me that there is more to it than trying to help Dagos obtain monsters, and I suspect that this extreme weather is the natural outcome. If you look past his actions to the outcomes and try not to guess at his motivations, you'll see that almost every member of the Dagos royal family and high nobles who took part in the attacks on Wavemates are now dead. Many of their holdings have been reassigned, removed from their families, if they have any left. Sentiment on the continent has firmly turned against them, and the royal bloodline of wavemates has returned to their home territory. Not to the old capital, but to royal holdings nonetheless. The king took a long drag on his cigar. You're saying that he's been handing the Dagos nobles just enough rope to hang themselves? That he's been stoking the fires of war as a way for what? For the dragon-blooded to get vengeance on the ones who wronged them. That is one of the three primary deductions, and the one that I am most inclined to believe. The other two are that he is actually attempting to expand his territory, but for some reason didn't mobilize all the mages under him and didn't touch the Maudlian theocracy at all. Or that he is entirely unaware of the actions being undertaken by the mage sects within his territory. That is a possibility, but he is still receiving regular updates from informants, and his castle has radio reception. The odds that his staff and nobles have managed to keep something this large from him seem extremely low, given that many of them are undead under his control. And what do we do now that he's managed to cause a natural disaster? Prince Alec shrugged. Well, I can't control the weather on that scale. It's not going to seriously affect his territory, so he can get away with taking very little action. However, we are part of the Northeaster Alliance, and there are a huge number of refugees leaving the cities. We are going to need to send supplies to them for at least a year after the storm passes. Allseal on the coast of Chip was just confirmed lost to the storm surge. Tens of thousands dead and nearly 50,000 refugees have fled inland, with an unknown number of additional casualties due to storm winds over 300 kilometers an hour and extreme rain. The storm has started to come inland, and Penelm, in West Kyria, has been calling for assistance, as they have received nearly 2 meters of rain in 72 hours. We don't know for certain how bad things have gotten in Dagos, but the last radio report said that the Un River had fully breached its banks, so the city of Staptenden is likely flooded as well. That's 150,000 people. The cities along the northern coast have been completely silent. Prince Claudius cleared his throat. King Gustav has requested any aid that we can send his territory, and is willing to negotiate a deal as soon as the storm passes. Albrols is likely to end up flooded as well, by the way. The river runs right through the city, and they will be in the eye of the storm by tonight. The king sighed. That does not sound like something that the king of Shersdonia could have done on purpose. No matter what he was intending, even if it were to set off a war to get vengeance for his old friend the Dragon King, I can't see a way that he could have caused the storm, and that is far more important than the war at this point. Prince Alec smiled. Why don't we invite his people to Westover for the meetings? The envoys are still there, and I can go represent your throne if you don't object. Bringing them to the table might give us more insight into what their intentions are and what is actually going on behind the scenes. See that it is done. Claudius, you will be the face of the relief efforts for the Northeast. As the next king, building reputation in advance matters more than anything else during this crisis. Chapter 504, From Shersdonia. In the royal palace of Shersdonia, the king set down his daily reports with a smile. The last of the wandering Dagos royals was dead at the hands of the butcher of Westover. Things were coming along very well, and it was almost time to move on to the next phase of his plan. When the Signia throne requests an envoy, prepare one. Nothing less than a duke, but no undead. Oh, and send some of the debutantes as well. Westover is a wonderful place for a young techno-witch or a budding necromancer to grow into her own. They won't lose out, marrying one of the lower nobles there. He informed his advisor, his voice a low rasp that chilled the blood. Yes, your highness. We will see that it is done. Dominic looked up from his work as he felt a chill run down his back. Was someone plotting against him? Silly question, of course someone was. He just didn't know who. Alexis set her head on his shoulder as she read the reports over his shoulder. You've been busy lately. Do you have the latest finance reports? Dominic gestured to the pile of reports to be sorted. I have them. I just haven't gotten to reading them yet. I'm a bit scared to see how much we've been spending lately. I did send out 2 more convoys of Magitech fireplaces today, though. That should help keep things funded. If there are more funding needs, I will figure something out. The airship is already on its way back. They loaded up with sheep and a farm family, then were turned back by the storm. As soon as they got past the border, The wind started to get too high even for our new airship design to fly safely. Or perhaps it was about the rain. It's not clear from the radio report, but they say that they've got enough cargo that they can provide a proof of concept report to the guild. Alexis smiled. Rill has been so excited about that airship. You would think that we promised him a puppy and then made him wait to pick it up. So, we probably shouldn't keep the first one for the duchy, is what you're saying? He would definitely cry. But there is one more thing that I thought I should add to your pile of reports. Baron Dax seems to have a particular fondness for Princess Min of Amerdon. She might be the most minor possible princess from a tertiary branch of the family, but Amer still counts her as a royal. So, they will be expecting a full royal wedding. Oh, and you need to do something about Poppy. That girl stresses me out. I can't decide if she wants her brother to take another concubine or not, but he keeps dumping her on me, and I'm not spending another morning discussing dishware and makeup. Dominic laughed. I will take care of it. She's an excellent hostess, but she's a bit intense. Are there any others that you think might be an issue, or who needs special attention? Abe and Melissa, that girl from the academy. They need to be married sooner than later, or someone is going to end up with a questionable birth date. Oh, I'm surprised nobody told me yet. Alexis rolled her eyes. I found out from Dave, who was speaking with the veiled maids. Did you know the trolls still get upset when they take their veils off? They don't have a name for them when they can see their faces, and it confuses them. But the trolls love to gossip, and they know everything that happens around the manor. Apparently, Potato has realized that he can bribe Larry with soup ingredients to borrow an upstairs bedroom in their barracks. Dominic laughed. Well, his is also a chef for the regiment. It's only natural that he's friends with Larry. What did Ingrid say about it? She thinks they make a cute couple. I will put them first on the list. Arranging a royal wedding could take some time, but I think there is usually a delay anyhow, right? So that we can send out the invites and such. Alexis nodded. Amer likely won't even bother to send anyone, unless it's her parents, and we've got everyone who will likely show up for Baron Dax already here in the city except his own parents. So, it shouldn't be too difficult to get the guests here. A twist of magic, and the ringing of a bell caused them both to turn. Alexis had her sword in her hand, and Dominic had his claws out. But then the bell rang again, and Dominic realized that someone was requesting permission to open a portal. Reaching across his desk, he picked up the tarnished brass bell left behind by his predecessor and rang the bell in return. A portal opened, and a waft of stale air came through before an aged techno-witch stepped through, holding a device in her hand. Your Grace, I am Tryon of Sherstonia, Duchess Dowager of Shursden, and advisor to the king. She announced, barely more than a whisper. Greetings, Duchess. Please take a seat. Might I ask what brings you here today? The old woman smiled as she hobbled over to a chair, using a long staff as a walking stick. His Immortal Highness has requested that I come to serve as his emissary. Or he will in a day or two. I didn't feel like waiting. Alexis pinched the bridge of her nose, trying to stave off an imminent headache. I will arrange rooms in the manor for an envoy team, she whispered, then exited the room, leaving Dominic to deal with the techno-witch. That woman's magic creeped her out, but the prospect of an envoy from a nation they had no formal relations with suddenly showing up in Westover was enough to make her head hurt. She needed to send a message to her father and find out what was going on before more people started to show up. And then she needed to get the team to start on plans to expand the housing in the manor. Whether it went on top of the existing housing or used up some of the back fields, she didn't care. But they desperately needed more housing. Chapter 505. With Tryon. Dominic took a fresh pot of tea from the maid and poured a cup for Tryon. I hope it's to your taste. It's a local vintage. The old witch sipped the tea, then smiled. You have trolls here. This is their tea. Nobody else makes tea like this. Indeed. I have a force of mountain trolls as manor guards. They are quite adept and completely loyal. To a dragon prince? I would imagine that utterly loyal might be an understatement. Don't mind that portal. They will want to send some sluts through in a few minutes. Dominic nearly choked on his tea. Pardon? Oh, noble ladies. You know what they're like. Nothing but boys, money and fashion in their minds, utterly vapid. Can you send them back? We've got enough of those. Maybe replace them with some mages, perhaps a witch or two. Tryon smiled. I like you, Duke of Westover. I will tell them. Did you need a concubine? The king surely has at least one or two suitable ladies in the palace he could send. That is highly unwise. My wife would not be pleased. The old woman shrugged. If she kills you, I can just bring you back to life. An undead dragonkin would be quite powerful. Has anyone ever mentioned that techno-witches are a bit off? Many times. This tea is lovely, though. Perhaps I will have them send one of my great-granddaughters here. Do you have a proper school? We do. Run by the Duskblade sect. I don't know how their supply of techno-witch teachers is, though. A shame that. Mages are a bit boring. Dominic was quickly realizing why Alexis had run away. Trying to talk to techno-witches was enough to drive anyone a bit crazy. But he could already hear the sound of running feet on the other side of the portal. I think they noticed you are gone. It seems so, but they really should not have made me wait. Don't worry, we won't be sending a whole army to put on a show for my presence here. Not that I need one here in Westover. There are so many skeletons in town, I could raise an entire army. Dominic hadn't realized that was an option. Necromancers were rare, and a techno-witch who had studied necromantic magic was even more absurd. However, many species of monsters' bones didn't burn well, so they had been buried after cremation, and there were the memorial cairns in town filled with bones as well. A pair of guards in black tabards stopped at the portal, panting for breath. Advisor Tryon, you were supposed to wait for the formal request and the others to be ready. The guard huffed. That took too long. Look at this wonderful tea that the Duke made for me. Plus, how often do you get to chat with someone who has such a wonderful nickname? Only a select few royals manage to earn themselves a proper nickname. The Butcher of Westover. It just oozes with charisma. The guards silently stared at her, but the ancient Duchess Dowager didn't seem to mind at all. If she was going to ignore the angry royal guards, so would Dominic. They were on the other side of the portal, so they weren't planning to come over. That meant they were someone else's problem. A few seconds later, a pair of terrified-looking young men in black mage robes with their hoods up came to stand by the portal and waited silently as Tryon and Dominic sipped tea. Do you think that they're coming in, or did you train them to be silent until addressed? Dominic asked. They're escorting the debutantes. We couldn't show up to a debutante ball without them. But they're just acolytes. They haven't earned the right to speak in front of their betters yet. Dominic refilled their tea, while Tryon watched the party outside the window and waited for the others to arrive. 4 middle-aged women in gray dresses that made them look like a stern governess were the next to arrive, followed by a line of young women walking in strict lockstep. They looked nearly as terrified as the first 2 young men did, but mostly terrified of the women in gray. Ah, there they are. Duke Dominic, meet the ladies of the Shersdonia royal court. Well, ladies might be pushing it, but I recall that they all have some noble blood. Tryon explained, her voice quiet, but carrying. Advisor, kindly do not disparage the lineage of the young ladies in front of the foreign nobles. The women in gray stepped through the portal with their stern glare turned on the unrepentant techno-witch, who waved her teacup at them. Oh, don't give me that. We all know their background. The Duke will surely look into their lineage soon enough, and the Merchants' Guild won't lie to him. It's better that we just tell him in advance. Besides, he's got the Natural Sons Regiment here. The young ladies looked confused, and Dominic smiled. They're all younger sons, illegitimate sons, and other minor nobles who enlisted for the promise of titles and lands. A future that they could earn in exchange for miliary merits. They had exceptional records during the conflict with Dagos, but not a man among them was in line for an inheritance that he didn't earn himself. That made the young ladies relax a little. There are also over 100 other noblemen here from all over Signia, and they include many who are in line for titles. We also have the Crown Prince of Axbridge here, but he's officially in attendance in the role of envoy, not as part of the event. That didn't get as many of them excited as Dominic had expected, and he began to wonder if the ladies of Shersdonia were more practical than others, or if these particular ones had been briefed by their families on what sort of nobleman would be best for them to seek out for marriage. In his experience, Even if they had practical thoughts, the idea of getting to be favored by an extremely wealthy prince was always more alluring than the idea of marrying a newly appointed baron or knight who had little more than a title and some freshly healed war wounds. Or, going by their mana levels, perhaps these ladies were simply expecting to make their own way through life, and having a competent husband was a bonus, not a requirement? Getting a bunch more magic users did seem like a rather generous gift from the Necromancer King. Suspiciously generous, really. Chapter 506. Reserved Magical Ladies. One thing that Dominic did immediately notice was that the ladies of Shersdonia were much more reserved than the other noblewomen who had come to attend the event. Not in fashion. Though they mostly wore fully covering dresses suitable to a desert climate, that was also common with the ladies of Axbridge. But they were not loud, arrogant, or even as cheerful and exuberant as the other noble ladies. His first suspicion was that it was just while they were under supervision. But when a maid came to inform them that there were rooms being made ready, the matrons in gray all left to check them, and the girls' attitudes didn't change at all. Tryon and the two young men were the only ones left when the older women left, but the techno-witch didn't seem at all interested in them, which left Dominic to juggle both groups. Ladies, my apologies for the small space. I wasn't expecting so many guests. If you would like to take a seat in the next room, there are plenty. And a fireplace, should you wish to stay warmer. Advisor Tryon, would you like to move to a larger venue? The old woman sighed as she finished her tea. All right, I suppose that I am required to socialize outside my official duties. Dominic helped her to her feet with a smile. I'm sure it won't be that bad. If nothing else, your position will help them impress a potential husband if you put in a good word for them, so they have to be nice to you. Tryon gave him a mischievous grin. Oh, they have to be nice to me anyhow. Centuries ago, the king gave me permission to turn anyone who irritates me into a zombie. I would appreciate it if you would refrain from that while you are here. Zombies upset the trolls. Perhaps a solid spanking to keep them in line. The debutantes gave Dominic matching horrified looks, while the old woman cackled with joy. Oh, wouldn't that be a sight? You hear that, ladies, you will behave, or I will find you a good husband who believes in spankings to keep his wife in line. The old techno, which was definitely a little crazy, but the debutantes were on their best behavior as they followed her down the hall behind Dominic. A few of the younger men from the Capital Academy stopped to watch them walk by, unaware that there had been more arrivals. Gentlemen, these are the ladies of the Shersdonia Royal Palace. They will be joining the festivities momentarily, as we are preparing rooms for them. Dominic called. Ladies, it's a pleasure to meet you. We will be looking forward to your official arrival. The larger sitting room was much better, and Dominic noticed that the ladies were immediately drawn to the Magitech controls for the fireplace. It's fed off the house's central storage crystal, that is just a control panel for the fireplace activation level. It's a common setup for baronial manors and other large houses here in the duchy. If you happen to find a match here, and the house doesn't have a similar setup, the techno wizards in town sell them. One of the girls giggled. Of course, Your Grace. Fortunately, some of us are techno wizards as well. Or techno witches, if an outdated system needs repair. Dominic was about to say more when the staff who had accompanied them returned, and the girls all straightened their postures. Welcome back. Does the Duchess have their rooms prepared? The largest of the women in gray nodded grimly and spoke in a gravelly voice made harsh by years of heavy smoking or ailments. Indeed. The housing is limited, and they will be bunked for to a room. However, she promised that additional housing was being built. Dominic nodded. I am arranging it this afternoon, and with a full team on it, we should have housing in the next few days, waiting on any furniture that we cannot easily make locally. They actually had a lot of it in the Merchants Guild warehouse, but it was best not to get hopes up too high. Girls, follow. The debutantes curtsied and rushed out after her, while Tryon rolled her eyes. The matrons of the palace tend to get uppity. They forget that just because they raised the girls from infancy, it doesn't give them any sort of rank over them once they come of age. However, I despise dealing with them, so I don't stop it. Dominic called for more tea and a bottle of rum. Given your aversion to people in general, how did you end up as the envoy? She smiled gently at him. Oh, it's not that I'm a misanthrope. I just despise sniveling young humans. 300 years of their nonsense will do that to a woman. Ah, I hadn't realized. Dominic replied carefully. Tryon shrugged. It's common enough among long-lived techno-witches. But I won't let my personal feelings sabotage a trade deal or make any rookie mistakes, which is why I was chosen. I must say, though, this place is nicer than I remember. I haven't been here in some time, and you've made upgrades. I like the housing around the back gardens. The meetings here used to feel somewhat clandestine, held in the sub-basement under candlelight. But this setup with the villas in an arc around the central garden gives everyone their own space, and we can bring more people with us. If I had known, I would have called for more staff than the 2 acolytes who will take notes for me. Where did they go, anyhow? They're in the corner. Right you are. They're exceptionally well trained. I forgot that they were here. Dominic smiled along with her comments, but one thing echoed in his brain. There was a sub-basement in the manor, a hidden space that he had yet to find. Presumably, it held many secrets and might hold some sort of treasures. Though, why nobody had mentioned it to him before was a mystery. There had been many here who had been guests of the Earl, so they should have known about the space if they were here for meetings. Chapter 507, Sub-Basement. I see you looking at the wall. If you want to move to the old meeting room, I don't object. It looks like the handle has been removed, but a touch of magic will open the door just fine. Tryon suggested. Dominic tilted his chin to the acolytes, but the old woman patted him on the head. Relax, they won't tell anyone. They literally can't. So, they weren't silent because they were well trained. They had a curse of silence cast on them to keep them silent until they earned the right to speak, as she had called it. Are you up for a spot of historical exploration? I haven't been down there since I came back. Dominic asked. She should also know if there were more hidden passages or tricks to accessing the space. He was a child when Westover fell, certainly not privy to meetings between the nobles and other dignitaries. Oh, that would be lovely. I do love nostalgia. I will lead the way. The wall slid back, then to the side, revealing a narrow doorway. Inside, the air was stale, and Dominic could see a thin layer of dust over everything. Not as much as he had expected, but with the room sealed, there wouldn't have been much dust to accumulate. Fortunately, there was ventilation. Dominic could sense the Magitech circuitry on the wall, separate from the house's regular systems. When he activated the circuit, fans turned on, and the lights came on, guiding their path down the stairs. Tryon sighed comfortably as she stepped down the stairs. Ah, this is better. No offense, but Westover smells too much like grass and rain and nature. Dominic laughed. Usually people mean that as a compliment. The ancient techno-witch laughed. The scents make magic more difficult to cast. When a witch's magic goes awry, there is usually a feeling or smell. But if you're doing it outdoors with changing scents, you can miss it. Besides, I live in the Shersdonia Castle, which is full of undead. It's got that stale air necromancer's lair vibes thing going on. Dominic looked down the side tunnels as they reached an intersection and quickly realized that they ran up toward the kitchen and down toward the river. That side smelled like water, but the tunnel was dry, so it was likely blocked and sealed. Now, he had to find the entrance in the kitchen so that the staff could come down here when they were needed. The fact that it had been hidden from everyone so effectively was actually impressive. With so many skilled people in the house, he thought that someone would have found the entrance by now. Tryon paused as she looked for the activation mechanism to lead them in the right direction. Then, she reached out and pushed her hand through an illusion. The tunnel opened ahead of them, slightly offset from the previous tunnel, so checking for a hollow cavity directly in front of you wouldn't find anything. The techno-witch stepped through into a large room and turned the lights on with a wave of her hand. Inside, it was clearly a royal banquet hall, larger than the actual manor house. There were artificial windows, stained glass with illumination behind them to simulate daylight. It gave the space a rather open feeling, despite Dominic knowing that they were at least 10 meters underground. Just as I remember it. But empty. I think that they cleared it all out after the last event. Which means there is likely a storage item here with all the spare furniture. The Earl of Westover used to have staff put the tables into a storage cube after dinner to open the dance floor. That should be here somewhere if those Dago's thieves didn't destroy it. Care to explore? I've never been in here, Dominic suggested. Oh, this will be fun. We will go together. Can't have the king thinking I would steal from you. He's got a soft spot for your lineage. Dominic laughed. The space wasn't large enough that she could easily steal anything, but exploring together would eliminate any chance of misunderstandings. Oh, this is easier than I thought. The storage cube is literally on the table at the door. Tryon laughed, with a gesture toward a large bronze Magitech device sitting on a stone end table, next to a vase with a fake flower arrangement in it. Well, that was anticlimactic. Now, we hope that it's not bonded to someone. Though, you can likely fix that, given that you're a techno-witch. He placed his hand on the cube and found that not only was it unlocked for general use, it was completely packed with furniture. Tables, chairs, cots, divider screens, bed linens, wall tapestries, curtains, even rugs were rolled and organized inside. That space is insane. Whoever made that had some real skills. Dominic noted. I believe it was a gift from the king. Being able to store everything for the meeting hall would normally take a half-dozen cubes, but he always used that single one. This space is incredible. Are there more rooms attached to this? Or did they just redecorate the one space? Dominic asked. There are sitting rooms on the sides that got redecorated as bedrooms when someone was staying over. There is also a portal array around here somewhere. I forget what room it is because I have my own, so I just used that one to travel. When we held meetings here, we would all meet in the front room of the manor so that anyone watching from the outside didn't see us arrive, and then we would go down to the basement for privacy. We have so much to talk about. The more that I find in the duchy, the more that I realize I didn't know half of what was going on here before the invasion. Well, we can talk as we explore. This sitting room by the stairs was always my favorite. The stairs lead to the balcony boxes above us. Oh, the stories those stairs could tell. I heard a rumor that the King of Signia was conceived right here on the balcony steps. Chapter 508, Uncanny. Dominic froze in shock. Wait, what? Oh, that's well before your time. I was here for a merchant guild negotiation about border tariffs, as I recall. The young king and his newlywed queen were quite the randy pair, you see. Did you know that she was part elf? The previous queen, that is. The current king's mother. Such a sweet girl. But that's not the point. When they were still young, it was a well-known fact that they couldn't have found a better match for the crown prince, and he ascended the throne the day of his wedding, as his father stepped down. Now, none of us caught them at it, but that was because we were giving them as much privacy as we could when they were all over each other every waking moment of the day. How he managed to govern is a mystery. I suspect that the retired king did most of the actual work that first year. But when the crown prince was born, the one who is now king, the timeline added up to the week that we were all here for meetings. And you know how royal rumors are. Everyone loves to speculate, even those of you who hold less public positions. Tryon explained. Well, that certainly is a revelation. Her face seemed to transform with joy as the old techno-witch remembered many previous visits to this location. Then she stared at Dominic with a look of revelation on her face. You know, you look a lot like the Earl. But then, he looked a lot like the king as well. So perhaps it ran in the family? It's uncanny. I wonder if that was why the fool from Dagos was so determined that you should die. He spent the rest of his life hunting down the last known survivor of the Dragon King's direct lineage, squandered half his treasury on it while his lands dried up and his people fled. Dominic shrugged. I don't know why he was so obsessed with hunting me down, but I had regular run-ins with people who still got fresh bounty posters with my likeness on them, even up to the last few years before I came to Signia. I wonder if he thought that the curse on his land would break if the lineage of the Dragon King was completely extinguished? As far as I know, there are no descendants of the Wavemate's royal lineage left. The old woman laughed. No descendants? If you go back even 2 generations, there are plenty. The entire second branch of the Mitfield royal family descended from a single marriage to a Wavemate's princess. She married the king's brother, and they had children like they were trying to repopulate humanity. The man never even took a concubine, but he ended up with nearly 24 children. Sure, They don't bear the Wavemate's name, but they still carry the blood. And why do you think that the Signia royal family is blonde, when most of the country has black hair? Dominic frowned, and Tryon laughed. If you're worried about it, the last match was 4 generations back. You didn't marry your own cousin. Well, that is a relief. I know that the royal families like to keep things fairly close, but there are limits. As the king of the Bauman Empire once said, if she's not good enough for her own family, she's not good enough for ours. Or something like that. But you should come check out this fresco. If I recall right, it should have a painting of the past few dragon kings and their advisors. Dominic followed her into a side room where the ceiling was entirely covered in paintings, and froze in shock as he saw a newer painting near the back wall. It was him. No doubt about it, they had even captured the odd golden glow of his eyes when he got excited. Only, this man was at least a decade older, and he was standing beside a woman with short pointy horns and holding a small blonde child. Okay, that's almost creepy. You're not wrong. I hadn't realized how uncanny it was until I saw you standing next to the portrait. That's a long time ago, I suppose. Still within my lifetime, but at least a few decades ago. The woman beside him is the grand concubine, so that must be her child. He didn't have any young children when he was that age. Though I don't recall that she did either. But she lived here, so it makes sense that the painting would be of her and him together to represent that generation. If you look lower, you will see the paintings of each of the earls that govern this territory. That one there, you should know him. Dominic smiled. Of course, I recognize my uncle, the earl. There are many other photos of him in the manor as well. We preserved them and left them up. It seemed only right, given the circumstances. His eyes returned to the image of the Dragon King and the concubine. Staring at it too long was going to be bad for his mental health, as it raised many uncomfortable questions. But he couldn't look away. How could he look so much like someone else when they were, at best, distantly related? Even a father and son would rarely look so much alike. The odds of someone else looking that similar should be nearly zero, but it didn't match anything that Dominic knew about his own family. His memory was better than most as a young child, and he certainly hadn't seen anyone who looked like himself before. But the resemblance between himself and the king only highlighted how little he looked like his own parents. They were dragonkin, and they did have a familial resemblance, enough that he would never have questioned the absolute fact that he was born in their house in the woods of Westover. But now he had questions. Chapter 509. There will be questions. Now that I see you standing next to the painting of him as a younger man, the resemblance is undeniable. There is no way around the fact that you are a Wavemate's prince. Tryon announced, then turned to look at some of the other paintings. Dominic nodded. I should likely make this room off limits if I bring more people down here. It's a bit too obvious that we're related, and that's going to raise some questions. The Techno-Witch laughed. Oh, yes it will. But everyone who had ever met the king will have those questions. The older you get, the more that you look like him. It's most likely inevitable. His father was the same way. The whole lineage looks like miniature clones of their fathers as they grow up. Give it another 15 years, and you'll likely be close to 2 meters tall, and built like everyone expects a dragon king to be. Dominic sighed, and Tryon smiled. Personally, I'm with you on this one. Taking over responsibilities is overrated. Who would want to be a royal if they could trust someone else to do the job? Dominic laughed. You know, I started as a blacksmith in the royal forges, then went to advisor before things got out of hand. Tryon winked at him. That's because you chose to be advisor to one of the battle-obsessed twins. You should have known that talking to them about new weapons is practically foreplay. Oh, that's brilliant. I wonder if any of my girls know about weapons? They might be able to land a royal guard. The whole paladin order is a bit ammo-sexual. Dominic chuckled. That was actually a good description, even if it wasn't a real word. Is this a conspiracy to embed noble spies among my people? Tryon rolled her eyes at him. If it was, don't you think I'd pick someone smarter than that lot? Shersdonia has black ladies, similar to your veiled maids, but trained in necromancy and blade work. They're a much better option to honey-trap the paladins. She was not wrong about that. Let's check the rest of the rooms. Perhaps there is something left behind by the old staff. Dominic locked the room behind them when they went back to the main hall, then checked the next room, only to find a public toilet. That seemed like an unlikely place for a clue, but perhaps that was the point. The cleaning staff were the only ones who would normally pay this area any attention, and unlike the bare rooms, there were some potential hiding spots here. Dominic quickly scanned the most likely spots, but found that they had all been cleaned as well as everything else, with only a bit of dust left from the long time sealed away. No secret love letters hidden in the ladies' room? Tryon asked. Nothing I can find. If they left one, they hid it well. Perhaps staff will find it when they come to clean. But I'm not convinced that there will be anything to find. The attack came too fast to evacuate the town, so nobody was brought to the manor to hide. If anyone was here during the final day, it was a staff member who couldn't fight, and I don't know who all would have had access. The old woman shrugged. Likely none of them. This wasn't a place that common staff was allowed to know about. Only the head maid was allowed in the Earl's office and quarters. None of the rest would have had access. That explains it. I take it that there were not a lot of survivors from the region? She asked. Not that I know of. From what I can tell, only a few were killed inside the manor. The rest died on the grounds. The wall around the compound didn't exist at the time. I added that recently, to protect the extra guests. I haven't looked outside yet. I didn't realize that you'd added fortifications. They moved from room to room, finding nothing but years of dust and empty rooms, as all the furniture had been moved into the storage cube for preservation. It was actually a brilliant idea. It kept everything from getting aged just sitting around waiting for important guests, and most of the contents of the cube looked nearly new. Well, that was a bit less exciting than expected after the first room. But it's quite nostalgic being back down here again. Should we rejoin the others before they come looking for us? Tryon suggested. I think we should. The entire compound is so horribly overcrowded that it will be a while before I am finished with the day's duties. It seems every time we think that things are getting settled, more people arrive. The old witch laughed. Oh, you have no idea. We had the oracle look before I came over. You have so many more people coming. In fact, there should be more here soon. Not more than an hour if we count the ones that are coming from Western Signia. It's going to be a grand party, the sort that they will talk about for decades to come. I should have ordered more rum. Indeed. I suspect that the entire city will sell out of it soon. The old witch smirked at him as she poured something into her tea from a flask hidden in her coat. When they returned to the office and sealed the entrance behind them, Dominic unlocked the office and found a runner waiting outside. How bad? 7 airships on final approach, for engineers waiting for construction instructions relating to the manor compound, and Princess Poppy stabbed someone. That last one definitely sounded like a Princess Alexis sort of issue. Then, Dominic remembered that Poppy was an Axbridge princess, not a Signia princess. That made it most definitely his problem. Please send the princess and the victim in. If the engineers are ready, I will see them while she prepares. Chapter 5:10. Angry Poppy. The engineers rushed inside the moment that Dominic mentioned them, already unrolling blueprints. Your Grace, we've got plans, and if we rush, we can get the base structures up before the airships land. Our apologies for interrupting a meeting between advisors. No worries. Your work is time-sensitive. What do you have for me? We have room for a secondary courtyard ring outside the existing one. It will cramp the gardens and bring the housing nearly to the pastures, but if we limit the exterior space and make them 4 stories tall instead of 2, with tile roofs, we can get them up in under an hour apiece. There won't be anything in them, not even a fireplace insert, but we can call for some to be shipped over. The guests should be arriving with travel supplies, I hope, and they can fill it as they wish. It's working in the warehouses we built between the city and the airship docks as well. We added a mezzanine level to them, which we can remove later if we need, so that they can set tents on 2 floors. It's crowded, but it's indoors, dry and clean. Dominic nodded. Are there still more of them being built? I suspect that we're not going to see a slowdown in housing demand anytime soon, and we can't put everyone out in the rain. Not with this sort of weather. Once we build proper housing for everyone who stays, they can be repurposed into factories, and such. It's not a major loss for us to build as many warehouses as we can. The big airship is on its way back as well. They're collecting livestock, which will have to go to the farmers. We don't have room for them inside the manor grounds. The engineer from the infrastructure team laughed. I doubt those goats would let them stay anyhow. Territorial, they are. Then he nodded and handed over the designs for Dominic to check. They were basically the same as the existing ones, with a balcony around every level and a small yard. Smaller than the front row, and not surrounded by hedges. But time was limited, and they were going to have to rush to just get the basic building up. All right, do what you can. We will likely be filling them as fast as you put them up. The engineers left, and Dave escorted Princess Poppy in, with the girls slung over his shoulder, and Prince Fahad chasing after him. Dave, put the princess down. The prince demanded. Nope. She's in trouble. Boss lady said we can't thump a princess, so she's going to the boss man. Dominic saw that Fahad was smiling at Dave's response, but he was doing his best to keep a serious composure, given the circumstances. The problem was that he was completely incapable of stopping Dave without resorting to violence. He had tried the non-violent route, and the troll had just picked him up and carried him in the other hand. Kindly arrange the princess in a chair and guard the door. Dominic instructed. Dave very gently placed the irate and red-faced princess in a chair, while she glared at him with a level of fury that shocked Dominic. Princess Poppy was a very bubbly person, not the sort to stab anyone, and certainly not the sort to pick fights with a 400-kilo troll in battle armor. All right, Your Highness. Kindly start at the beginning, because I have no idea what was going on while I was busy with the advisor from Shersdonia. Princess Poppy sat silently, glaring at everyone. So, Dominic poured tea for the group, and then went to the cabinet to offer a harder beverage to Prince Fahad and Tryon. Crown Prince Fahad, this is Duchess Dowager Tryon, advisor to the King of Shersdonia. Duchess Tryon, Crown Prince Fahad of Axbridge, and his younger sister Princess Poppy. Tryon nodded politely. Good to see you again, Your Highness. Fahad gave Dominic a look that screamed, get her out of here, but the old woman lived for gossip, and he might need to have Dave physically remove her. Now, can I get an overview? Or do I need to call Dave back in to explain the nuances of a situation? Fahad cleared his throat, and Poppy sighed. Fine, but only because letting Dave try to explain would be a travesty. I first met Janice of Biverlow Mews when we were small children. She's been a bitch ever since. Fahad growled at her, while Tryon smiled. What? I won't say that I like her. Anyhow, every time that we meet, she goes out of her way to try to frame me for something. This time, she paid off one of her escorts to corner me in a dressing room. He attempted to pull at my clothes so she could snap a compromising picture, and I lost my temper. She went silent and crossed her arms over her chest, while Dominic finished a glass of rum and poured himself another. So, what you're saying is that I have a bleeding man in the medical center who should be charged with sexual assault, but who can't be because it would ruin your reputation. And I can't charge him with corruption because he works for a Signia noble, and he was just doing as his employer said. If it were one of mine, this would be easier. Prince Fahad, do you have anything to add? The Crown Prince contemplated his answer over an entire glass of rum, while Dominic waited patiently. I am not convinced that the two of them will be able to peacefully coexist in the same place at this point. One or the other needs to be relocated. Dave, what are the guests saying about the situation? I know that you have good ears. Dave smiled. Everyone likes the Poppy, even when she's bratty. The other girl has lots of friends, too. But not the real friends, the sort who want things. That didn't make it easier. If she were awful to everyone, there wouldn't be any complaints if he relocated her to one of the houses in town. But it sounded like she had fairly high status. As he recalled, Biverlow Mews was a county, so she was most likely a count's daughter. Influential enough that most would want to make the alliance, and that openly kicking her out would cause political complaints about Dominic. But the first issue would be dealing with her injured man.